Hi, welcome to FixerBrazil Podcast. My name is Tomás Cavalieri and I will interview professionals from the film industry to talk about the pleasures and challenges of filming in Brazil and all over the world. And today we have in the episode David Walton Smith. David is a director, cinematographer and editor with experience in commercial, short-form documentary and branded content. His work has taken him around the globe, creating content for major brands and companies. Originally from Scotland, he has lived in the United States since the late 90s, but continues to travel back and forth. He works for LonelyLeap Films and Warner Media, but he now calls Chicago his home. David, thanks very much for recording this podcast with us. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Amazing. I would like to start with a simple question, which is, how did you get to where you are today? Was it something that you have discovered during your childhood or later in life?
I could probably give some credit to my childhood, but I fell into it with a little bit of luck. So I grew up in Scotland, and yeah, they make films and TV shows and stuff in Scotland too, but it's not a big industry. So I grew up not knowing that you could actually work in the industry. I didn't know how to break in. So it never seemed like a feasible career. And then when I moved to the States, my initial thing was I was going to be a graphic designer in advertising. And through that, I met some people that were like, you would be a great director. You should do film. And so I started doing shoots when I was at an ad agency and getting into the production side of it while I worked at this agency as a graphic designer first. So yeah, I kind of got lucky. I was right place, right time. I had the right mentors that opened doors for me, but it was something I always was interested in, like growing up, like a lot of kids around the world, like watching American movies. I was captivated by Jurassic Park and E.T. and Star Wars and all that kind of stuff. So always interested in it, but I never thought I would ever work in the industry until my 20s, really.
Amazing. And I was reading on your website or your LinkedIn that one of your first jobs was as an editor for Botn to Explore, that you have edited for 2 seasons. How did it help you to start in your career?
So that was another one of those where it was a right place, right time. So I went to a film school for just a couple of classes, and one of my mentors and a teacher there was a producer on that show, Botn to Explore. And I had just enrolled into my master's program in film school. I was 3 weeks in, and they called me and said, do you want to edit the show? And I'm like, I literally just started school. But they were like, it's remote, you can do it on your own time. So I did both. I went to school and I edited the show. And so obviously it kicked in a door. The thing was on TV, it won an Emmy. So it was pretty high profile, particularly for being so early in my career. So that helped just because of the exposure of it. But really, it helped me more from a filmmaking and a craft standpoint, because I learned how much of directing can be controlled in post-production. And I realized how much power the editor actually has, which has stayed with me, which is why I'm still a director and an editor.
Was this the first big job that you had, or because you have experience as cinematographer, editor, director, was this the first big job that you had, or you have done some DOP job before, or camera assistant? How, because you do a lot of things.
Yeah, I'd been sort of doing much smaller stuff for a handful of years before that. So I started on Botn to Explore in 2010. But I probably started kind of dipping my foot into the industry in about 2007. So the first thing I ever did was I made a short film called The Replicant. And honestly, I didn't know what I was doing when I made it. I wrote it, I shot it with some friends, and it took us a long time to finish the post-production because we shot a bunch of it on a green screen, and I didn't know how to do compositing yet. And so I had to figure out how to do it. And so that was a big learning curve. But all that time I was doing small local commercials for car dealerships and shops and restaurants. And probably the first big high profile thing I worked on was a Hollywood film with Kevin Bacon called Death Sentence. Big Hollywood movie that filmed in South Carolina. And I worked behind the scenes doing like EPKs, so like DVD bonus features for the movie, which was great because it was the first time I met celebrities. I met Kevin Bacon and John Goodman, and the director James Wan did the Saw movies, and he's doing like the Aquaman movies now and stuff like that. So got to meet all these really cool people, and it opened my eyes to like what the industry could be. So that was probably the first big thing, to be honest.
That sounds great. It's a good start, right? Like in the big set for Hollywood film. And late in your career, you when did you start to direct?
So the blessing and the curse of editing Born to Explore was that, I'm an editor on a television show, right, that airs nationally. So when I introduced myself to people when I moved to New York, I'd say, I'm a director, but then they'd look at my resume and they'd be like, you're an editor. And it was hard for them to wrap their head around the fact that I could also direct, because the most high profile thing on my resume was this editing thing. And so I got really lucky once again. I started as an editor at LonelyLeap Films, which is a UK-based production company that had opened an office in Brooklyn. And at the time, there was maybe 3 full-time employees there. I think I was like number 4 or 5. So super small outfit. But the benefit of it being so small is that, yeah, I was hired as an editor, but everyone had to do a little bit of everything. So I had the opportunity to direct there and shoot there and produce there and write, is where I learned how to write decks for pitching for commercial clients and to pitch clients on calls or in meetings. So it was almost like another round of film school, learning on the job. But that was a really formative time for me working at LonelyLeap, because you got to wear 5 or 6 different hats. And I started as an editor, but I'd say within about 2 years, I was more of a director there. So that's kind of where the transition happened.
Amazing, because the first job when we met was a LonelyLeap production here in Brazil for Google. Actually, it was like 2 films. We produced it together. So I was working as fixer and you were directing, like, I think it was around 16, 17 people in Rio de Janeiro. So I'd like to watch one of these films, the Hand Talk film about Google My Business, and if you can tell us a little bit about how you concept this film and how was directing it.
Yeah, of course.
So this was filmed in Rio de Janeiro. It's about an app for deaf people, right? So how did this film came about?
We had been trying to get Google as a client at LonelyLeap for a while. And at first, they would come to us to do a lot of research for them. And so we would come up with great stories for films, but then we wouldn't actually get to make the films. They'd go to another production company. And it's because they saw that we were young and we hadn't been tested yet. But after doing research for them for a while, we earned their trust. A big part of that is because there was a big thing that we were involved in that was shooting in the Himalayas about the Sherpas. And there was a big avalanche and a bunch of people died. And the shoot obviously ended because of this big tragic event. But we were still able to salvage the footage we did get, create a series of documentaries that became these fantastic emotional documentaries, and Google loved them. And all of a sudden, they were throwing work at us. And so real quick, they're like, all right, we want to shoot in Asia and then Latin America and all these other places. And so this came out of, it didn't have to be in Brazil. Like, they essentially wanted to do shoots anywhere in South America. So we were looking at shoots in Paraguay and Uruguay and Argentina, Bolivia. But the one best story that came out of it that we found was this app in Brazil. And so essentially they were looking for companies that were doing innovative stuff and using Google My Business to advertise or organize their business. And so we found this company that happened to use Google. Funnily enough, they ended up getting, I think, bought by Google, acquired by Google after the shoot. But yeah, it was just a perfect fit. They were really, as they would say, like a googly brand. And so we went down there, made that the short film about them, and then, as you know, we were able to tack on another film, Favela Brass, which originally wasn't scoped for, but I felt really personal about that one. Um, and so I said, look, if you give us just a little bit more money, you can get two movies for almost the price of one. And they
Amazing.
went for it, thankfully. And I love that film. It's still one of my favorite things that I did. But so is Hand Talk. Like, it's beautiful. The judoka community that we met, the mixed martial arts people, were also welcoming. Vanessa, who is the subject in the film, was just so gracious with her time, and it was so nice to meet her and to meet the deaf community in Brazil and learn more about the deaf community there, because it's a sign language, but it's different sign language than in the US than in Europe. So to learn all of that was really, I mean, it was really cool.
And it's really amazing, David, because we're going to watch a couple of other films that you directed, and they are all very engaging and emotional, beautiful stories. I mean, the cinematography, there is your touch, I think, in these different films. So how do you approach these characters? Because like we were filming in the favelas, in the communities of Rio de Janeiro, it's a very different place from where you are originally from, like Europe, Scotland, and then US. So how to engage with the people? Because you have already filmed also in Asia, in other places. How to engage and get these stories, people to engage with you while you are directing?
I think because I grew up in the UK, I moved to the States when I was 14. I've always traveled a lot as well. Like, as a lot of people that live in and grow up in Europe, they just travel internationally more than Americans do, because Europe's much smaller. It's easier to go to other countries and experience very different cultures. And so I think I've always just been a bit more aware of cultural differences. But I also think that, I come from a very like blue collar place. I grew up with people that didn't have a ton of money. There were no rich people in my life when I was growing up. And I think it means that I can come into, for example, the favelas in Rio de Janeiro, and I can empathize and approach the subject, I think, with a bit more tact than maybe some people could. Um, when I started as a director, I always found, and honestly, I found this on Hand Talk with the Google producers, that they didn't understand my approach, because I'm not a very loud director. I don't talk a lot. I'm not like dictating. I like to just be patient and let the people do what they do and get comfortable. And sometimes producers think that that means I don't know what I'm doing, but then you see the result and it comes across so authentic. And it took a while for people to realize that's just my approach. Is I don't talk over people. I don't interrupt them and say, no, say it again, but say it like this, or any of that. I just let them be who they are. And I think that's served me well, because as you say, my work, there's a common thread. They're very emotionally driven. I didn't know that I was good at that. I just kind of realized that after a few films, I'm like, oh shit, I'm pretty good at this apparently. When I started, I want to make science fiction action movies, but it turns out I'm pretty good at these emotional docu commercial type things. So, go with the flow.
Sure, it's interesting because it's something that you discover along your career, along uh, the film crews, the places that you visit. It's not something, maybe of course it's something that you were born with, but once you engage with the people and you find out that you're different. Because my approach as a producer also, although the producers are known like for being very tough and screaming with people, or very anxious and everything. I don't know, this is the mood maybe that people think. I'm very smooth and quiet and easygoing because I know that thing is gonna happen, the thing is gonna break, or the thing is gonna, people are gonna be late, and I have
Yeah.
to be upfront of everything. But I'm trying to be easygoing, and in the set, it's sometimes it's very busy and loudy and everything. So I remember very well the way you were directing. Your style is very different.
Yeah. I don't like uptight people and like the unnecessary stress. Like sometimes you need to go and sometimes you need to like pick up the pace, but a lot of times it's like we have all day. Let's just get good stuff. We don't need to get lots of stuff. We just need a little bit of good stuff.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, the film's only 2 minutes long. We're shooting all week. Like it shouldn't take all week to get 2 minutes. Like just take your time, get the good stuff. And that's always been my approach.
This was like, I think, one of the first days,
Yeah,
still
that's right next to the
scouting, right?
Maracanã.
Yeah,
Yeah,
scouting locations,
yeah,
right? And having a look around, grabbing some B-roll on the
yeah.
streets. And then we went to the favelas, because those two films in Rio de Janeiro, we were filming in the communities, in the poor communities in the favelas.
Well, remember I can't remember the names of them, but the first favela we filmed in for Hand Talk was a lot more like kind of rougher than the second one, where we did Favela Brass. There was like more tourists and stuff living there, like Airbnbs and stuff, whereas the other one felt a bit more like just regular people. And I know that there was there was some people on set that we had to like be careful around and stuff like that, like some gangster types or something. But
Right.
it was again, it was just everywhere we went was so welcoming. Like everyone was just genuinely curious and so helpful. And obviously, the crew that you assembled for us there, everyone was incredible at their job, which is why the shoot also was so relaxed. It just went with the flow because everyone just brought their A game and everyone was so chill. So it meshed well with my directing approach. That guy right there, that's Jason Harper. He was a producer and shooter on the project too, and someone I look up to a lot. We worked together for a long time, and he's also a very chill, relaxed guy. He doesn't raise his voice, and so yeah, the whole vibe of the shoot was very relaxed. And all this time, particularly these earlier photos when we were like scouting, I was just in my element because growing up in Scotland, I'm a big soccer fan, football fan. And so to be in like one of the meccas of football, and we went to the Maracanã Stadium, and I was like, these days I was just a tourist. I was just enjoying being a tourist.
Yeah, it was nice to see how the mood of the crew reflects the way you directed. I remember Jason very also easygoing, and Chris, also the first assistant, also very nice guy. We had a great mood with the crew. These two guys working together
Yeah,
are
yeah.
amazing. And but filming in the favelas here was anything that besides the drug dealers and the armed guys, which were, we had to take all the precautions up front.
Sure.
Anything else that you remember that you struggled with, or the dealing with this the deaf people, that you had translator, and the translator for their signs language, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, again, everyone that we brought in was just so good at what they did. It made it so easy. It obviously was tricky with there's a translation from English to Portuguese and then Portuguese to sign language, right? So there's like 2 degrees of separation between me and the talent. But then, the translators were so incredible. So it was just so easy to talk to them. And then honestly, like Vanessa, who was our subject, the deaf woman, was just so like intuitive. She like knew what to do after a couple of days. She like was really good on camera. Um, one of the things that I'm remembering now, like as we were doing the pre-production for both the shoots that we did in Brazil, you know, most of the stuff that I was storyboarding or shot listing was like just pulled out of thin air. Like I'm just from based on what I've seen of Brazil on like movies or TV. I'm like, I want to film here, 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 but I don't really know what it's like. But like you and your team put that together. I was like, I need a shot like this. I want a beach with volleyball and a mountain in the back, and you found it. And then I need the judo studio in the favela, and you found that. So like it was like I dreamed these things. I didn't know they existed. And then I showed up and every day it's like, oh yeah, this is that thing that I storyboarded that I didn't know existed, but I'm glad it did. So yeah, I mean, it was cool. It was great.
Sure, and we also had like we are based in here in São Paulo, but we have like local producers all over Brazil. Every time I travel to work somewhere, I get a couple of contacts in Rio de Janeiro, which is a tricky place to film because of the communities and people.
Hmm.
All the film crews want to film like in the favelas in Rio, so we have a reliable contact with the local community to be safe, which is the main concern there. And also, I mean, there's a lot of regulations for filming on the streets. Once the film crew is bigger, you need more bureaucracy and paperwork, which you have to deal with. But I'm happy to hear again because we were really happy with at the end of the two shoots. We had like minor problems that always happens during any shooting. But then we had 2 days off, and then we did the Favela Brass, which is a film I know that you love, and I'm gonna play right now. We can watch it again, and you can tell me why do you love this so much.
Era uma vez uma garota chamada Gabriela. Ela morava em uma favela no Rio de Janeiro, onde eles inventaram o samba e a feijoada. Gabriela amava uma coisa mais que tudo na vida: o trompete dela. Ela o levava para todos os lugares. Ela o tocava para todo mundo que quisesse escutar.
E para quem não quisesse também, né?
Então, um dia ela descobriu o Favela Brass. Ela conheceu um professor chamado Tom. Ele disse que seria ótimo se ela tocasse com ele. Mas foi melhor do que ótimo, foi
Excellent!
O trompete dela foi música para os ouvidos dele. Olha, mãe!
Oh, meu Deus!
So, like earlier, I was saying, with Google, we did all this research of stories, and at one point there was probably 100 potential stories to tell in Latin America, and obviously the one that they went with was Hand Talk, but the runner-up was Favela Brass, and so I just had a different vision for Favela Brass. I didn't want to go in and do a documentary. I wanted to do something somewhat scripted. So even though Favela Brass is a real thing and these aren't actors, I made them act and I gave them lines and we shot it like a Wes Anderson film essentially. And we shot in anamorphic 235. We brought special lenses in for all of that. And so I wanted to treat it more like a scripted piece. And so the fact that they went for it, they were very hesitant because they were just used to everything being documentary style. And I was like, trust me, this is going to work. And I'm like, there's going to be graphics on screen popping up and it's just going to be quirky and fun. And honestly, I think the only reason it got greenlit is because we did that for about a fifth of the budget of the Hand Talk one. So we were like, just give us a tiny bit more money and you'll get a second film. And the irony is Hand Talk never really officially got released, but Favela Brass did. And I think they ran it as like a pre-roll ad in Brazil, like on YouTube and stuff like that. So people actually got to see that one, which is the other thing, like all that stuff we did for Google was really cool because there was really healthy budgets. We got to travel the world. Like that year that I met you in Brazil, I was in India, Japan, Indonesia with them as well. But a lot of those films never really saw the light of day publicly. They were kind of internal things. And we can talk about my transition out of LonelyLeap soon, but like that was part of the reason. I was like, I'm making these beautiful films, but no one gets to see them. or not enough people get to see them. And so I moved on so I can do stuff that was more public, but that was the blessing and the curse with that. But the fact that Favela Brass not only got greenlit and then released and it was seen publicly, it sort of was like, I want to be like, I told you so. Like, I knew this was going to be great, and it was. But everyone was happy with it. And yeah, I just loved it. And the little girl that's in it was incredible. Yeah, it was just such a fun experience to shoot like a scripted film in another country. It was just like, something out of my wildest dreams. Prior to doing that, if you said, hey, next year you're going to shoot a movie in Brazil, I'd be like, no way. So the fact that I got to do something so stylized is something I'm really proud of.
And you talked a little bit about Jason already, but and in LonelyLeap you mentioned that all of you used to do like a little bit of editing, a little bit of producing, directing when needed. So, but for not only this project, but for other projects, how do you choose the crew that you're going to work with? I mean, or do you always have this freedom to choose the crew, or sometimes the production company says, oh, you have to work with this or that DOP? How, at this point in your career, how do you deal with this, like picking up the right people for the right job, right?
Yeah, so when I was at LonelyLeap, even at the point we did those shoots, like we'd scaled up a bit, but we still maybe only had about 15 full-time employees in New York. So it was a very small company still, even when we were at our biggest. And so essentially all the above the line crew would rotate. And so like if I produced something for Jason, the next thing we'd flip-flop. And then we had like other producer directors and they'd flip-flop. So there was probably about 5 or 6 of us that did some directing, some producing, some shooting, and we'd just sort of rotate. Or if we had like a personal reason to be the director, like if someone was like, oh, we're going to do a film in Scotland, then I would probably be like, well, I'd like to direct that because I'm from there and I'd like to go home and visit my family and shoot there. So things like that would happen as well if you had a personal reason to want to do it. But it was pretty democratic, Later when I left LonelyLeap and I was at Warner Media and it was a much bigger place. It was more that I got to choose. And when I got to that point in my career where I got to choose, it was based on contacts that I made. It's, as you said earlier, we showed a photo of Chris Unko. I worked with Chris a good bit, and he worked with LonelyLeap for a long time. And he's now an accomplished cinematographer in his own right. But, he wasn't staff, but pretty much anywhere we went, we'd take Chris because Chris was amazing. And so you meet people along the way that you're just always going to work with. I mean, same goes for, if I was ever going to do another shoot in Brazil, I'm not going to be Googling Fixer in Brazil. I have one, I know who to call.
That's amazing. Thank you very much. I'd like to see a couple of behind the scenes pictures also from Favela Brass. Nice. So Favela Brass. This was the second favela that we have visited in Brazil for this project. So this was chosen because the main character lived there, right?
Lived there, and obviously, we scouted this one as well. And as you saw in that last photo, there's amazing vantage points. Like the view from that particular favela was very scenic. But that's the joy of shooting in the favelas. There's so much texture and real life and color. So yeah, we go on a scout obviously to choose the shots, but we could have put the camera anywhere and it would look good because it's just so colorful and full of life. But yeah, where the actual Favela Brass place is, Tom's sort of house and studio, school, just happens to have an incredible view, and it's an incredible house in its own right. So we got lucky with that. I mean, as you can see from that picture, it's very colorful. He teaches kids how to play instruments, so it's a very welcoming place. I know this was not
another location, right?
Yeah,
this is another.
But so this is a prime example. I literally had a storyboard drawn up of a football pitch with the city in the background, and I didn't know if that existed, and you found it, and wasn't it like a monastery or something? I think there's like nuns there or something.
Something like that, yeah. It was
Yeah.
rainy day, but we managed to make it happen
Wait.
anyway. This is one thing about filmmaking, documentary style, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. This is probably my favorite location we filmed at the whole shoot. It was just very visual, and I love the symmetry of it, and the cinematography, and the actual finished piece is incredible. But yeah, like that view is just picturesque. Like I said, you put the camera down, everything looks nice.
I don't know who.
Hmm. I do remember it was exhausting walking up those stairs with all the gear.
Yeah, up and down, right. There
Yeah.
we are.
Yeah,
That's for
here we
real.
are.
And in her house, preparing, setting up Chris that you mentioned before, yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, and that guy there, that's Hunter. He was the producer from Google.
exactly. And this is again preparing Tom's place for that
Mm-hmm.
scene.
Yeah.
I'd like to ask you how do you approach the gear? You also have experience as a DOP, so how do you approach the gear today for the projects? Of course, sometimes if it's for some TV or streaming, you have the standards, or sometimes even the production company requires something. But how do you see how it evolves today? Like, for example, drones or iPhones. I can use this to shoot an amazing film. How do you
Yep.
see how it evolves today?
A lot of cinematographers are what I would call gearheads, so they care a lot about the equipment. I am the opposite. I don't care about the equipment. Now, obviously, if I have two options and one's better, I'll go with the better one. But if you told me that I had to come back and do a sequel to Hand Talk, but I could only use my phone, I'd be happy, because you don't need an Alexa or a Red to capture beautiful images. And for the most part, I find that people that rely on expensive equipment, it's their crux. But I think if you have a good eye and good composition skills and you understand lighting, any camera works. And so I actually, particularly depends on the shoot, like you said, but if it's docu style, I favor speed over an expensive camera. So if I can get a camera that like has internal stabilization, so I can do a lot of handheld without needing a gimbal, because I hate gimbals. I think they look really artificial and floaty, and I just hate the look. So if I can go handheld with some stabilization, if I can have a really fast lens, if the camera can be small enough that I can film places without a permit and no one will notice me, these are things that I favor over having a big thing with an easy rig or a steady cam. And those things are fun and you can get amazing stuff out of it. But for like documentary type stuff, it just slows you down. When you have a camera that requires three assistants, it's just not the right camera, I think, for documentary. But yeah, if I was doing a scripted movie and I have all the time in the world and I've got a big crew, then yeah, I want to use the best gear, the best lenses, and all that kind of stuff. But I favor speed and function over the actual equipment. And when people are like, "What camera do you like?" I'm like, any camera. Give me a camcorder from 1995 and I'm happy.
After filming here in Brazil, you also filmed in some countries in Asia. So there is this project that you shot by Bien.
한 30살쯤 되니까 한국의 아이덴티티, 한국의 어떤 독자적인 풍경이나 우리가 가지고 있는 고유의 것이 뭘까? 그랬을 때 그냥 스스로 눈앞에 띄는 게 소나무였어요. 제 이름은 외병우고요. 흔히들 풍경사진 작가라고 그러는데 그냥 사진가예요. 네.
So after LonelyLeap, I went to work at Warner Media for a subsidiary of the company called Courageous Studios. And we were essentially the brand studio for CNN. And so we had to make essentially commercials and branded documentaries, but it had to feel like it belonged on CNN's platform, and what they would call native content. And so the idea is that if one of our spots came up on CNN, people aren't going to change the channel because they think it's a commercial. They're going to stay on the channel because they think it's a documentary. And that treads a line of ethics, right? Because if it's a commercial, you don't want to trick people into thinking it's not. But a commercial can still be done really well and still be compelling. And so it's like, how do I make it clear that this is an ad, but also make the spot tasteful and interesting? And so in the early years in particular at Courageous, we had a lot of free reign and the clients trusted us. And so that meant we were able to make really compelling content. And so that this spot about Baby NU, he's a world-renowned photographer. He does a lot of things, architecture and stuff, but he's really famous for these photographs of pine trees, pine forests in Korea. But yeah, essentially this came out of, we went to Korea for about 8 weeks and we shot about 6 films. Total, as a company, we did about 20 films, but I was there for about 8 weeks and did 6. And this one in particular is probably my favorite that we got there because, as you've said before, like it's got a slow pace to it. It's contemplative. It's almost sort of like I don't know. It's like just a character study. We're not hitting you over the head with like lines of dialogue or interviews. It's kind of a nice, quiet film, and we just let the scenery do the talking. You know, show don't tell.
내가 죽는 순간까지 내가 10년만 더 살았으면 내가 더 훌륭한 사진을 찍을 수 있는데 그리고 많이 작업하는 외에는 방법이 없어요. 그래서 지금도 그냥 끊임없이 해야 된다는 그 생각 외에는 다른 생각이 없어요.
And so, yeah, I love this film.
And it's interesting because it's very counterintuitive because like commercials should be like clipping and images and popping and brands and everything. So all of these films, this may be the most contemplative one, but it's interesting how you are able to sell this idea to the brands, you know, or to the stations or to the clients.
Yeah.
They trust
we were lucky as well. Well, we were lucky as well because the platform dictated that too, because this ran on a platform called Great Big Story, which had actually folded a couple of years ago and now it's back. Someone else licensed it and it's a whole other company, but essentially they bought the back catalog, which is why these films are still live on YouTube. But they were creating purely editorial documentaries as well that weren't branded. And so the idea was that if their audience tuned in to watch this, it better look and feel like one of their usual films. If it feels too much like a commercial, they're going to turn it off. And so it made it easier to sell to the client that like, look, if you just make a good film and you put your logo on it, the audience is going to respect you. But if you have a line where the photographer turns to the camera and says, I drove to the forest today in my Hyundai, then you lose the audience, right? It's just tasteful or tasteless. So yeah, it was a lot easier to have a delicate touch because they already knew what the platform was going to be and that platform had to have a delicate touch.
And how was it like filming in Asia compared to filming in Brazil? Very different locations. I mean, one question that I have, not only the culture difference, but also the crew. Because, for example, I was talking to another producer another day, and I was saying that I feel like, because here in Brazil, we get people from Europe, from US, maybe also from Asia and other places. But once we are together, we are working as a crew, most of the time, we understand the role, we know how it works, so it's not super different, of course. There are different languages and everything, but I mean, the way that you work is similar. Do you feel the same? Or is there anything that you struggle with as a director, dealing with these different crews in different places in the world?
So in Asia, I filmed in Japan, Indonesia, Korea, and India. and all four of them are very different. And the biggest culture shock that I've gotten, not just in Asia but in the world, was probably India and Indonesia. And part of that is there's not just a cultural difference, but there's like a lot of strict religious things that you have to abide by as well. Certain countries, you have to dress certain ways to go into certain places and to be respectful of that culture. Like filming in Brazil, it's just like going anywhere in Europe, really, to be honest. Like, yeah, it's a Latin country, so there's a language and cultural difference, but it's not so far different from what most people experience in the US or in Europe. It's a very like similar kind of culture. There's a lot of things that are quite similar. The food isn't super foreign. Like when people go to India, the food could scare them. I just happen to love Indian food, so I actually really enjoyed it. But some people are terrified of Indian food. They don't like spicy food and stuff. And so, yeah, it's kind of hard to go to India and have, say, a cheeseburger. It's really hard to find that because they don't eat beef. So there's a lot of culture shock there. But with the crew specifically, I also just found that it was just a different rhythm and cadence. The crew in India that we had was fantastic, but it just moved slower. It was like just a different shorter. It was just like, we'll get to it,
Mm-hmm.
and they weren't being dismissive. It's just that that's the way it is. And then Indonesia was kind of like that too. Also in Indonesia, the traffic was probably the worst I've ever experienced in my life. And so it'd be like, okay, we're going to go to this location. And then you'd be in the car 6 hours when they thought it was going to be 2 hours. And so then you'd maybe have a little bit of like, maybe the producer should have known that. Like, but again, me, I'm like chill. I'm like, whatever. But my producer's yelling at this producer, and I'm like, all right, this is too much. But those are the more difficult places to film. Shooting in Korea was a lot like shooting in the US. Obviously, big language barrier. But, we had a really good fixer there who he was born in Korea, but then he was raised in New York, and then he moved back to Korea. So he was like, 100% bilingual, fluent in both. And so that really helped as well. I think if we didn't have the fixer we had in Korea, it could have been more difficult, but he was just exemplary. So yeah, I think it comes down to when you're going overseas, like who is your fixer? But you do have to just have a bit of patience sometimes with some of the culture difference. And again, just be empathetic. Like if things are different in another country, it's not good or bad. It's just different. And, I'm the interloper, I'm the traveler. So I'm the one that has to adjust. I can't expect a whole country or a whole city to adjust to me. I'm just one person. So you got to come in as a producer or a director into other countries and just go with the flow and trust the fixer. Like I deferred to you a lot in Brazil because it's like, all right, is this normal? Is this what the expectations are? Well, and you were very good at like sort of setting expectations. And if we had a long commute and it's like, oh, the traffic's going to be bad, you'd set that expectation. And it's like, okay, cool, great. So I think the experience level of the producer, not just from like their experience making productions, but just their experience with other cultures and to anticipate the differences of other cultures really helps make the production smooth. And I think when I've been in some countries, they've always been amazing fixers and local crew. They maybe just, some of them didn't have as much experience. And so that's where there was a little bit of friction. But I've always just had the best experiences when I've filmed overseas.
Let's have a look at this short commercial that you did, Be a Difference Maker, which won a silver prize at Addy, which is this association of commercials. Which organization is this one?
Yeah, they call it an Addy.
Addy.
Honestly, off the top of my head, I don't know what the organization is that does it. There's a handful of, because I think, so if any of the like awards or anything that I've gotten, I don't know what any of them are, because like I don't submit. It's the company submits, and it's just my name is on it. So I have no idea what any of this stuff is.
I was going to ask you about this because you have a couple of prizes that you got, Cannes and this one. How do you deal with this? Or it's something that the production company applies for the prizes?
Yeah, I honestly couldn't tell you like anything about them. Like, I just want to tell good stories, you know, like the prizes don't mean anything to me. These are the things that companies put on their wall so that they can get more clients. But I've never once booked a gig because I won a prize. No one's ever said, "Oh, you won a silver Addy, so we want to give you a job." It's never happened.
But if this one got a prize, like a couple of others, it means that it's a very good piece, right?
You know, I'll care. I'll care when it's an Oscar.
All right, let's go for it. Any projects in mind right now for the Oscars? What are you working on for your Oscar?
I'm always writing, right? I've been doing this commercial, you know, thing for what, about 15, 16 years now. And I started out in this industry because I wanted to make films, like real movies. And the thing is, you get caught up, right? You got bills to pay, and you're good at a thing, and people call you and you do it. But I definitely need to prioritize making a film because I feel like if I died tomorrow and I never made a feature film, I would regret my life. So I'm working on a couple of scripts, and at some point I just need to, you know, jump off the cliff and just do it. So hopefully it's on the horizon in the next year or two.
So where does this stock footage come from in the beginning of the film? Do you know, or this other, or is it?
It's
real?
actually it's real footage of the actress when she was young. So we cast her because she knew how to dance a little bit, and then because she knew she had footage of when she was a young kid. So yeah, we just got that from her. But yeah, this is a brand film for a university in North Carolina. At the time I was working, this was during the pandemic. So everyone was on lockdown, but in the South in the US, they were a little bit more, a little open. They didn't totally shut down. And so we did this right in the middle of the pandemic. So obviously the actors don't have masks and stuff, but behind scenes, everyone was all masked up and PPE, gloves, and all that kind of stuff. So that actually made it a really difficult shoot. But yeah, this was a brand film for them, and this is about 1:30 this. But then we did a bunch of like 30 seconds that were actually just commercials that ran on television. But I kept this one on my reel, the long cut, just because you get to see more of the footage that I was really happy with. But I think, if I'm not mistaken, we might have shot that on just like a Blackmagic 6K. I don't think we used a ARRI or anything. I know we used nice lenses. We used Atlas anamorphics. But yeah, I think because the shoot, I think, was only 2 days, maybe 3. So we had to move really fast. We were doing like 15, 16 setups in a day with maybe like 4 or 5 company moves. And so I think we opted for the smaller camera and smaller light package so we could be really nimble. But it was quite a production. There was probably about a 30-person crew, you know, full wardrobe and makeup and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, the pace that we moved that for that shoot was kind of crazy. But yeah, now I remember, like, yeah, it won that award, but I didn't know that until I'd already left that company for like 2 years when I found out. I was like, oh, cool, I won a thing. Sweet.
And was this one scripted by you? How did this story came about?
Yeah, I don't remember exactly everything, but essentially the way a lot of this work works is an agency will hit us up for a request for pitch. And so they might have, sometimes a company has a really good idea what they want, and sometimes they don't have any. But either way, as an agency or a creative, I need to pitch something for what they want, whether it's fleshed out or not. But I think they came to us and they just said they wanted something that highlighted the school and some of the programs that they had. But I think I just pitched the concept of showing sort of an entering student experiencing her first year in college. Well, I guess it's through graduation. But yeah, the pitching process for that would have been really relaxed, to be honest. Like the stuff I was doing in New York at Warner was a little more intensive, and even at LonelyLeap, like we were really competing for stuff. So like we'd submit an idea, but then two other agencies would submit one, and it was like winner takes all. Whereas this was already a client of the agency, so even if I wrote a terrible script, they probably would have said okay.
No, but it's beautiful, and the stock footage and the girl, and it's very nice, very beautiful film.
Yeah, the cinematographer of that is the same cinematographer of the stuff in Korea, the Baby and You. We've worked together a long time. That short film I said I did it way back in 2007.
Yeah.
He worked on that, so we've worked together a long time. You were asking earlier, like, how do you pick your crew? Sometimes it's kind of friendship, nepotism.
Sure.
But
Makes
you know, we
sense.
learned, we started at the same, and we've come up together, and so I work with him a lot. But I also love to, you find new people online, and you just reach out and you say, "Hey, I love the way you shoot. Would you be interested in working?" And then sometimes that works. Most times it works because, if you're making great work, you're probably a good person. But yeah, just cold calling people kind of works as well. But that's honestly one of my favorite things about the industry is you have these like little nuclei of like a little family of film people. And it's never this, like 10 years later, it's not the same people. Some leave, some more new ones come in, but there's maybe like a core. And you don't even always work with a core. Like maybe for 2 years they go off and do a thing, then they come back. And I love that. I've got like this probably a good network of at least 100 people. And I know that as long as I work in this industry, they'll come back into my network at some point. I know if I come back to Brazil for a shoot, that we get to work together. I know if I go to Korea, I get to work with the producer that I work with there. And so that's great. It could be 10 years, it could be 20 years, but I know that these people will still come back into my life because we created beautiful stuff in the past, so why not work with them again?
Sure. You start to build these connections, and once you get older in your career and you evolve, then you have trustful people that you can work with, right? We are almost finished here. It was a great talk, and I would like to ask as a final question about some advice for the young generation who wants to get in the film industry. I mean, you're a long way already in your career. You did a lot of great stuff like commercial work and your personal projects, but it's still a lot to do in the future, as you said. So people who are starting now, sometimes they are not sure if they want to direct, if they want to be a camera operator or DOP or producer. So your path tells a little bit how to handle it, but which advice would you give, like, let's say, for the young David now who is starting? It's a very different moment also in the industry, right? You have a phone, you can shoot, you can start a YouTube channel. I don't know, what are your insights?
The first time that I thought that I maybe wanted to do this, right, work in film, the tools just weren't really there, right? Like, I didn't have a digital nonlinear editor, right? In like 98, there was no Final Cut or Premiere or well, there was Avid, but Avid cost $30,000, right? Like regular people didn't have Avid. And so even if I shot something, I'd have to edit in camera, and that's limited, right? So I didn't have the tools to go out and do it. The point of that being that all the tools are so accessible nowadays that anyone can shoot whatever they want now. And you look at like, what's his name? Sean Baker. He's got that film Anora out, but he did Tangerine about 8 years ago, and he shot that on an iPhone like 6, and that started his career. I mean, he'd been doing films for a while before, but that really launched his career. And so you know, the tools are all there, but I think the big thing really is like I used to say this. So I went to grad school, and after I finished, I really regretted it because the debt outweighed the benefit. I feel like I learned a little bit, but I got a lot of debt. I owed the school a lot of money. And I was like, why did I do that? Like, I'm never going to pay that off. It's going to take forever. I've softened on that a little bit. So I actually teach part-time a little bit at a university in Chicago, DePaul. I teach film, and I'm realizing that like film school is important for some people. They learn better in a controlled school environment. I didn't need that. And in hindsight, the advice I would give me is don't go to film school. But I wouldn't say that for everyone. If you think that school is the environment that you need, then by all means go. But the advice I would say is you absolutely do not need to go to film school to work in film. Absolutely not. Like you said, you go out with your phone. You can edit on your phone. You can upload to YouTube. You're just, you know, one short film away from your film going viral and your career launching. None of that's going to happen at school, and none of that's going to happen if you don't make stuff. And that's the main thing. You have to make stuff. And I think the reason that my career kind of had a really fast start was when I go back 15 years, I'd have a job, edit a TV show or working on a commercial. But then on the weekend, I was shooting short films. I couldn't stop. It was a passion. And so even if I wasn't getting paid to do it, I would do it anyway. And because of that, that mentality opened doors for me because I was meeting more people, making more networking. I was getting into film festivals. And all of that is what propelled me forward. And that's what I would tell people. If you want to be a filmmaker, make films. It's as easy as that. Just make them. And they're going to suck at first, but you know, the only way you can learn is to fail. And that's what I tell my students is like, now is the time to make bad films and then learn how to make good ones. And there's no race. Some directors, Orson Welles was a young prodigy. And then some directors don't find success until they're in their 50s and 60s. There's no race. So my thing is be patient and just go out and shoot.
Amazing. It was a big pleasure to talk to you.
Likewise, man. It's always good to see you.
Good to see you. If you ever come to Brazil to work or to visit, don't hesitate to contact us.
I certainly will, man.
All right. Thank you very much, David. I wish you a good luck on your path to the Oscars. I'm fingers crossed here. Even if you don't make the Oscars, I want to watch your films because you're such a great director. Appreciate.
I appreciate it, man. Take care.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. See you in the next episode.